Welcome back, everyone. My name is Ben Jacobson, and I am the digital marketing strategist here at Page One Power. I'm also the host of our new series, SEO from Home. For those of you who have not seen it before, this is our series that we kind of started as a means to an end when obviously things kind of got shut down and we started missing out on some of the other chances to be able to share some of these ideas with people through our trade shows and being able to kind of interact with people. We started doing these SEO from home series and getting the chance to sit down and talk with a bunch of people inside of the SEO community and the digital marketing space and be able to learn a lot of really cool new tactics and techniques. And our goal really is to sit down with these industry experts and provide you guys with a variety of different types of tactics that you can actually apply in the real world on your own site, to your own business, to try to help improve your organic rankings, improve your marketing efforts, and just overall increase the profitability, the effectiveness, the growth of your business. So we're super excited. If you guys haven't seen any of the episodes before, we actually record all of these and we have them up usually about 24 to 48 hours afterwards. And you can see those on our YouTube channel at Page One Power, or of course you can check those out on our website at pageonepower.com. So before we get started, also we did have one other thing I wanted to mention for you guys. We did just also release our new ebook. It's a completely free ebook. It's all about link building. And we cover like so many topics. We're covering basically preparing for launch for your link building campaign. We're talking competitor analysis, link reclamation. I can never say that one. Link reclamation. And we're talking about local link building. There's all sorts of stuff in there. So I'm going to go ahead and just pop that in the chat real fast. If you guys are interested, again, that's completely free. And we have that available for you now. Next, we're going to be also having a Q&A option available for this webinar today. So if you guys do have any questions for myself or Peter, if you look on the bottom of your screen there, there's a little Q&A box. You can go ahead and just type your questions in there. And we'll try to get to those as we can. But if not, definitely make sure you ask those at the end if that does not get addressed in the meantime. Also, we did start our Facebook group, our SEO from Home private Facebook group. So if you guys are interested in joining that, we have a variety of topics that we post inside of there. We have a lot of our previous SEO from Home alumni in there, as well as some of our Page One Power experts too. So if you guys are interested in that, just do a search on Facebook for SEO from Home, and you can see that private group there and just do a request to join. So I'm done going through all that reading stuff, and I get to have the great pleasure of being joined today by former Page One Power employee and good friend, Peter Buffington. And he is going to be talking with us today about internal search and how that is going to be leveraged inside of larger corporations and how we can use these different techniques in order to try to improve how our customers are able to interact with our business. So without any further ado, Peter, go ahead and take it away.
Sounds great. Hope everyone's doing. Looks like I see a couple familiar faces on the webinar, which is great. So yeah, I'm Peter, and I'm like Ben said, I am a former Page One Power employee, and I have great memories working there, and love following what the company does, and I'm hoping to share some good info with you today. So I'll just share my screen real quick. It's more, I have a few slides, but it's kind of going to be more conversational. Can you guys all see that when it's in presentation mode?
Yeah, it looks good on my end.
All good? Cool. So just in the background there, so that's kind of where I'm living right now. So that's an hour south of Sydney, Australia. And normally I commute up to the ABC, the Australian Broadcasting Corporation, for work. But because of COVID, I've been working from our guest room for the last 6 months. So that's it's a really cool place. It's a university town. And I originally came here on a study exchange when I was in college. So that's where I'm living. And today I'm kind of going to talk to you about my role and something I'm really actually passionate about, even outside of work, which is internal search, and kind of how you can think about internal search and use internal search data to inform kind of wider content strategy and SEO. So just about me. So currently I'm a product manager at the ABC. And at the moment, my team looks after the internal search engines. So I'll kind of talk you through it. We have a number of websites and apps and different things like that. And they have their own kind of discovery experiences inside of them. And then our team also looks after the recommended content kind of sections or modules. So if you see like a, trending section, or you might like this, or, continue watching, we kind of look after the technology that powers that. And then previously to that, I worked at an agency called Mindshare here in Sydney. And it's kind of, I don't know if you've ever heard of it, but it's part of the Group M kind of media group. And I worked on Volvo and Dyson there, doing SEO, like organic search primarily. And then I also worked back at Page One Power when it was really small. I think there were, if I remember right, I think there were only 12 employees when I had my first day. So it was a small situation back then, but it was a really quality place, and it taught me a lot about, it taught me everything about the SEO industry. And it's still an unbelievable place that I really, I have good friends there, and I like to drop in there when I'm back in Idaho, which I normally am more frequently outside of COVID. But just some background on the bottom there. The ABC it's kind of like for I'm assuming a lot of you, most of you are in the US, but it's kind of like PBS and NPR but merged together. So it's a government funded kind of broadcaster that has content ranging from breaking news all the way down to kids video programming. And we do, our websites see kind of give or take about 3 million unique users a day. So it's a very kind of high volume suite of products that the ABC has. So just today, I kind of talked to Ben about what kind of angle I was going to take today to hopefully give you some knowledge. But I think a lot of what you'll hopefully get out of today is a new kind of mindset about internal search. That's kind of my goal. And that's kind of how I've always thought about it at the ABC. We used to not really focus on internal search. And I was kind of able to help, take it to a level where we had a team wrapped around it and actually really paying a lot of attention to it. And from there, it's kind of, been a bigger focus for all the teams in the digital product area. So today we'll talk about kind of why internal search matters for the ABC, like what we do with it. We'll talk about how we analyze internal search and what you might track or what you could look for if you're doing it as well. And then we'll have some actionable takeaways. So what can you actually do with internal search thinking or data, and then apply it to get, say, more Google traffic. And then obviously we'll have time for some questions. So the importance of internal search. So I guess in this presentation, I kind of refer to internal search and site search as the same thing. You guys have, most of you have probably heard those kind of terms thrown around. I'm sure there's other ones as well, but those are kind of the ones that I usually use. So for the ABC, internal search is I kind of like to think of it as the pulse of the ABC audience. We get tens and tens of thousands of searches a day, and like you'd assume, similar to Google, most of them are new. So most of them are news topics or different people, or questions about the US presidential debate that just happened. So it's always new, and we can quickly see what people like, kind of almost how people are engaging with our products in real time in terms of like ideas and what they want, rather than just kind of what they're clicking on. So this is kind of a visual of our ABC website search. And I think to tie it back to Page One Power and the SEO industry in general, we've done some studies at the ABC that show that, the highest volume kind of search terms in our platform mirror those in Google. So they're kind of a proportion of what's happening outside in Google. And that's kind of a reason that it's really important to pay attention to what's happening there and kind of take advantage of how you can make that better for the audience, because it'll often make it better elsewhere as well. And I'll kind of talk you through that. So these are just a lot of you probably aren't that familiar with the ABC. I know that I have a good actually a good friend and former colleague at Page One Power, Andrew Dennis, and I was visiting him in Idaho last year. I was there visiting family and friends, and I actually went over to his house, and his little boy was watching Bluey, which is an ABC produced kid show that would be found in the kids app on the left side of your screen. But yeah, so we have kids video apps. The middle one is ABC Listen app, which is an on-demand and streaming radio app that's getting to be much more high profile. And then we have iView on the far right, which is kind of an Australian on-demand and streaming video platform. And that one doesn't compete with Netflix in kind of a percentage sense, probably like nowhere does, but it does have a pretty significant share here in Australia. So those are just 3 examples of kind of different apps that we have. And then we have a number of different websites and other products like that. But I think the point here is they all have different search experiences. So the one on the left, that's little children, typing with even emojis sometimes. And that's obviously a search experience that's nearly impossible to handle. And then in the middle, we have things like people asking more natural language queries because they know that we have text transcripts from a lot of our audio as part of the search index there. And then on the right, we have different presenter information, and we're working to get things like the video captions in the actual search index. So I guess the point of this slide is just the ABC is a unique place because there's really no target audience because everyone's the target. It's a government funded organization where the audience is a very small child all the way up to elderly people.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I never would have even, I mean, of course, being in a little bit different space, I never would have even expected to think of searching in emojis, like, or, the transcription of, a podcaster or something like that is, yeah, I think that provides such an interesting, different perspective.
Yeah, and even that comment, Ben, is around the transcripts. Like that's something that, once we physically have a text transcript, there's no reason that we can't, publish that in an audience-facing way where it can benefit things like Google SEO or accessibility for people who are using screen readers, or because we just had a big problem at the ABC where if you're looking at like that episode in the middle visual, that episode about pandemic taking a toll on women's health, there's probably, thousands of different topics within, a 2-hour audio episode that aren't searchable until you have that transcript. So that's the type of thing that we're always thinking about in our team is how do we help these products actually make what they offer searchable. And this will, you'll kind of see later in the presentation how this thinking relates to any business you're working on, whether it's a small home loan company or it's a massive publisher. It doesn't really matter. It's kind of the whole concept of metadata and how things are labeled. Awesome. So this slide is just around kind of, I was trying to sum up what we've learned at the ABC from, we have about 15 different search experiences that are all different, like we just talked about. And some of these circles kind of tell me and the team and wider teams around things like, what people search and how often, which is pretty obvious. Metadata we're missing, our best content that isn't in the navigation, competitor content people think we have. So the ABC is similar in model to the BBC, if you guys are familiar with that. Mm-hmm. And a lot of people think that we have kind of bespoke BBC content, like they get confused. But from a content perspective, that you can quickly realize how important that is. If an audience is inside of where you've been trying to get them, through places like Google, and they're still kind of searching for something that your competitor has. And BBC isn't really a natural competitor in that sense for the ABC. They're more friendly like that. But you kind of get the point of, the more you know about what people think you have, that's a quick opportunity for a landing page, or an in-depth article. Page One Power, for example, is really good about writing really in-depth content that has an actual chance to rank. And that type of data can help that. But yeah, this slide's just about what we learn. I mean, there's automated page opportunities that you learn from internal search data, and we'll kind of talk through some of those as we go. So analyzing internal search. So a lot of our team's job is to roll out search to teams, but we also help them interpret it. So I guess the way I think about it, if I was going in and pitching internal search to a business, I would say the first thing is that if you have digital products, they should have a search. And a lot of teams at the ABC were doing research to kind of validate that they needed a search. But really, my opinion is that they should all have a search, because that if you don't, you're assuming that your navigation is so great that everyone's going to be, every single person, regardless of their ability or how familiar that they are with your business, are going to be able to find the exact landing page that you want them to. So I guess the first step is to think about internal search is you have to have one. And I know that, like, when I worked on SEO clients in the past, even big ones like Volvo, but especially smaller ones that I've worked at Page One Power. I worked on couple big clients at Page One Power that didn't have a search in their products, and also some smaller ones. And I think those smaller ones are surprisingly a huge opportunity for internal search. Oftentimes those websites aren't structured in a really user-friendly way. So I guess the takeaway here is if a product doesn't have a search and there's a way that you can get one in there simply, definitely have one in there. And this slide's a lot of words, but just the takeaway, and I'll have Ben, obviously this is recorded and shared after. But I think just quickly, some of the things that we track that you might not have thought about, and coming from a traditional kind of SEO industry background, what we track is obviously keywords. We also track the click position of where all those people are clicking, click-through rate. So we call that discovery rate. So how good is the search? Average searches per user. So does a user have to actually adjust their search 3 times before they convert? And in the search tech that we use, we actually have a feature where if Ben goes in there and types something, doesn't find what he wants, goes back and edits it, it'll recommend that to us automatically as a potential synonym, because potentially the audience has searched something that our metadata means but isn't labeled as. So that's a really interesting metric that we track a lot. And then the second to last bullet point around searches that were made that didn't have results. So this is kind of going back to that BBC example I had, where someone thinks that we have something. And this is a really important metric for content teams, because they can kind of look at new programming ideas, or on our gardening website, if someone's looking for a really specific type of composting, for example, and we don't have that and there were no results for that, we're able to create that. So that's a really key one. And then the last one's somewhat similar, but we look at kind of searches that were made that had results but didn't get a click. So that's obviously tied into the relevancy conversation. So why wasn't there a click? And these are all these are some of the things we track. We also track user location, unique users, all that stuff. And I did put a note that we use Algolia. I don't know if you've ever heard of Algolia. Their headquarters are in San Francisco. And they're a great instant search company that we don't ever recommend kind of our tech, but I do like working with them. So kind of tying back to, if I was going into a business and saying, how can you think about internal search? I would definitely kind of explain that businesses, like all the businesses we've worked in, they pay people to write content or manage a website. And I personally think that the internal search should be a dedicated focus, and kind of an always on type expertise, like a blog manager or anything like that. And obviously at the ABC, we were fortunate to have at the start, a 5-person team around the internal search. Obviously that's not going to happen in every business, but even if someone who, manages the website has this as a 15% of their weekly role to actually look at what's happening, report back to it, like the middle pillar around the content teams, the editorial teams, and at the ABC, the taxonomy teams, because those are the ones that are putting the subjects, the subject metadata and all of that, and titling the documents and all of that. The collaboration between this person or this team is really, really important with not only content, but technical teams. Some of you have probably worked with kind of big CMS systems and API teams and all of that. And it's just, I can't even explain how much we've been able to accomplish by having kind of that collaboration between this focus and those type of teams. So now we're just going to kind of talk about like how might you use this thinking, and what you're kind of tracking, and what about how your audience is using your products to actually help with kind of SEO and content strategy. And you probably kind of imagine what we're going to think about here based on what we've talked about. But we'll go through this. So create desired content. So if users are searching in your products, in my opinion, that's the definition of a page that should be created. And I know that our ABC Life team, which is a kind of lifestyle, I guess, brand, you could call it, they do this all the time around looking at what people are searching, and then writing content like working from home tax deductions you can claim this year. And this article came on the back of a government announcement that there was, I think it was from March. The financial year here goes March to June, or June to June. And when COVID started, they announced this, like, that you could claim 80 cents per day. I think that's what it was. Might have been a bit more than that, but it ended up being something like $300 or $400 kind of for anyone that was working from home. And obviously that's going to trend. And the ABC was kind of on top of this, and this content performed really well. People were on our ABC website, like looking for tax deduction news articles and different things. And ABC Life was able to create this content for that topic.
That's way cool. I mean, it almost seems like if you weren't considering search before, like just having it solely for the purpose of like having users tell you what they're looking for, like solely to create content. I mean, that's a huge advantage of having that.
Yeah, it is. And I think like my favorite example isn't really an internal search example, but the one I'll never forget is when I first moved to Sydney, I had a client that was in the recruitment industry, so kind of headhunter business. And we found this insight that there were something like, I think it was 250,000 people a month in Australia were searching for resignation letter templates or how to resign. And that was so interesting because that's kind of a traditional SEO insight, is to find kind of obviously what people are looking for in Google and create the most valuable content there. But, and then we did that, and they started to get so much traffic for resignation letter templates. And obviously those people need a job. So it's just, I don't know. I personally love search. I love looking at search data, but the internal search is interesting because it kind of has a different feel than Google, because at least, well, especially with ours, we get the kind of exact number and the exact time and the exact place that they're making it. It's not sampled. And, as you guys would know, Google now samples a lot of that stuff unless you're paying with the Google Ads stuff. So I guess the point here is it's really, really helped us at the ABC. And I think, like, I remember I worked on a home loan company when I was at Page One Power. And I just think even if it was a small business and someone came onto that site and searched for a really specific home loan and phrased it in a certain way, and you ended up creating a landing page and getting 2 extra home loans that year, I mean, that's a fair amount of profit gain for a simple insight. So that's kind of the way I think about this one, just always looking for opportunities with your internal search, because I think it's even more gold than Google, because they're already there and they think you should have that.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say.
So
Yeah, it's almost an extra vote of confidence because it's something that they're assuming that you already should have. Not even like, does anyone in the world have this? Like by searching through Google, it's something that they're coming specifically to you because they are assuming that you have that. So it's almost even like more distilled, it feels like.
exactly. And it ties back to what I was saying about how we did do some kind of analysis that, say we get whatever 1,000 searches in our platform, there was a similar percentage in Google for a number of the higher traffic keywords. So I guess the point is, if you create a well optimized page for that specific home loan, you're probably going to get Google traffic there as well.
Awesome. I like that.
So we all kind of hear about link value and different things about kind of SEO and positioning in your site, kind of architecture and IA and stuff. But I think one thing we've really learned is if the users can't find what they want, for one, they're going to go search. And if they're searching at a really high volume, it obviously means that you should move something in a more visible place, and ideally in a better place for SEO as well. So we've done this on a number of our websites, and that green box on the screen, obviously it highlights some kind of standard navigation, but things like the coronavirus page, and we have ones called like Trump's America and different things like that we often strategically put in navigation so it's closer to the root domain for SEO value. But I guess the point here is with internal search, if the top 10 keywords, in my opinion, and I haven't been able to make this happen at all at the ABC yet, but I think the top 10 keywords should be in a dynamic navigation on our home screens. Like, I think there's no reason to make that many people search the same thing every day when they could just click on it and it could be in a better position for search for Google. So I think the point here is using the internal search data to see what you should place closer to the root will, like we've kind of talked about in the last few slides, also help you get that SEO value for Google if you're kind of structuring things in a better way. So that's kind of the way to think about this, moving things into a quote kind of better place for search.
So when you say a dynamic nav bar, like, are you meaning like the actual position of like the categories would shift based on like the volume of search or like interest, or is that what you're?
Yeah, like there's some, I'll admit I go there sometimes. I go to the New York Daily News sometimes. I don't really know why, but they have kind of a trending search area that's almost a navigation. And we've talked about it at the ABC having, like we basically have talked about having like that top navigation bar, maybe having another one that's, the top 10 search items over the last amount of time. And kind of figuring out a way to structure those pages, based on that data in an SEO friendly way. Cool. And the thing is if we structure it like that, it also kind of helps our internal search, like in terms of the structure. And I'll kind of talk, I think there's a slide coming up about that, but I guess the point is I personally think navigation should change just from a user experience point of view, but also SEO is a big benefit. So the way our search engines work, really long story short, at the ABC, we have a ton of metadata on our pages. So it could be everything from a typical title tag that everyone's familiar with in SEO, but also everything down to actors in a movie, for example. And in this example on the screen, that Bluey show that the ABC helped create, that's a really popular one if any of you have children. That green box shows that for the episodes, we had to kind of map the program title to the episode documents because that wasn't done in our content management system. And we had to do that so that all of those episodes would show up for the program searches across our network. But I guess the point here is that doing that helps the episodes perform better in Google as well. So adding metadata for our own search engine always helps external search engines performance as well. And this is a really simple example just to explain it. But this is the type of thing that we're always thinking about, especially like we mentioned earlier around the podcast transcripts. How can we make our own search better and with our own, content and data, and then expose that to all of the search experiences we possibly can. So that's kind of the way to think about it. And I guess a takeaway from this presentation is, at least for me, I used to always think about SEO as mainly just the title and the kind of body copy and headers and all of that. But what else can you do with the content? Like, I think the audio one is an example. Like what else can you help clients make searchable, really, is kind of a good way to think about it.
Yeah, it seems like adding things like that, I mean, to your point, adding that helps your internal search, but it also helps the external. It just seems like any time that you're adding, I've noticed, like, essentially accessibility options. So transcriptions to videos, transcriptions to podcasts, it makes it searchable, but it's also, I think it has a secondary benefit that you're also making it more accessible to more people. So those people are able to experience that additionally and also be able to make it searchable.
Yeah, and I think that this is kind of another side point that's not totally internal search related, but is to what you said, is we were working closely with the accessibility person at the ABC, and like you can expect at the ABC, because we're government funded, we have a charter where we're for all Australians. So there's a really strong emphasis on accessible content. And we did this study where we were looking at our image alt text, and we found, and a lot of you guys on the call might already know this, or maybe might even disagree, but we found that our image alt text was arguably the biggest ranking factor for Google image search. And we were actually getting like hundreds of thousands of visits from image search. I think they've actually kind of changed the way you enter sites from image search now, but this was a little while back. But for things like burqa, like different kind of cultural searches that the ABC had really good images for, we were getting all of these visits to our website. So that's just another example about the more you can label well, especially that in areas search engines are using. And this applies to app. If you have any of your clients have apps, the app store is a whole nother kind of beast in terms of labeling and how you can kind of get as much info in those fields as possible.
When you were looking through like some of those image alt tag, and not to diverge too far from your point here, but are you noticing that because when I think a lot of people think image alt tags, I think there's still like that resonance of like just keyword packing images and trying to make it not necessarily user friendly, but trying to work that. Are you noticing that there was like anything in particular that was like working really well that helped you guys get that sort of click through?
Yeah, I think one thing that really helped is the accessibility guy in our team. Like that on his end, he's really focused on UX, because the person on the screen reader is going to have to listen to it if they're tabbing through it. Whereas on our search team, our default mindset is to say, okay, well, generally a little bit more information is better, but we don't want to spam this person who's sitting there on a screen reader. So I think what we found is that keeping it just succinct enough. Like with an example, I remember there was this article about an Olympic swimmer, and our compromise was to have the swimmer's full name, exactly what the competition was and where it was, but nothing more. So it wasn't anything really deep. It wasn't too deep about like the exact pool that they were at, etc. And that seemed to be working well in some of the tests that we had. and I think that principle applies to all of the metadata. Like we don't want to put everything in there, but as much as is relevant. And in this screenshot, Bluey is clearly relevant to the episodes. And that's a really simple way to improve a lot of those results.
Awesome.
So the other thing, so we're still in the section around this last section around what you can think about with the data. And a lot of you guys, everyone on this call, I'd imagine would be familiar with pages like this that rank #1 for a yellow shirts type search. And I think sometimes this is seen as spammy in the SEO industry, but I think we're at the ABC, at least we're looking at ways where we can leverage our internal search data to kind of do this in a more genuine way. And we're still working on that. But I guess the point here is we've kind of realized that this is quite a good user experience. And if you imagine we're an e-commerce clothing store, you know, this page would be really good in our internal search as well. So I think the key here is to think kind of like with the dynamic navigation or keyword lists, like what are ways that businesses, you know, of all size can use automation to create more SEO landing pages in a genuine, I guess we could call it like a white hat way, like what is actually providing value. And I know that some businesses, I know that there are some that just create a page automatically every time there's a search. But we're trying to get a bit more strategic with this around like our top, like we might, for example, use our search engine, our internal search engine to kind of construct topic pages at the ABC. So that's kind of an example of how we're thinking about, because everyone wants to have automation. We don't want to go away and create, you know, a single landing page all the time by hand. So just a call out to think about how to do that. Is everyone familiar with these? Ben, is this something that you would say is seen as spammy in the SEO industry, or?
Yeah, I mean, I think that yes and no. I mean, I think that there's kind of a balance of, you know, there's an understanding of what it's there for and why it serves that purpose. I don't know if it's necessarily ideal. I mean, it's, you know, it's more frustrating when people are trying to, you know, try to build links to those sorts of pages. But absolutely, I think that it serves its purpose, but we'd like to see something maybe a little bit more direct to speaking to the user's intent and not just specifically something that's auto-generated.
Yeah, it's a tough balance. Like we've even thought about things like, you know, we get, just say we get, you know, these 20 topic searches all the time. We've even thought about kind of collaborating with our editorial team to kind of generate these, but also have value in the text on the page, to kind of meet halfway, because it's kind of like you know, businesses automate things all the time, like box score templates in sports and all of that. But then there's a game summary, and that makes it really valuable. But I guess the point is at the ABC, we're trying to find, like we found with our internal search data, that there is a possibility to do this in kind of a way that meets our editorial guidelines and also will help provide a great landing spot, even if it's just in internal search. Like with this example. But yeah, just, I guess the point here isn't so much that these pages are the best form of automation. It's more, you know, the kind of dynamic navigation type stuff. Like what can you do with that data that's always coming in to kind of keep building out your products? So that's kind of the slides I had. And then I thought we could just kind of open it up to questions about internal search or anything. I'm not as I'm not as deep in the kind of Google tricks the last couple months as a lot of the audience on this call. But if anyone has any questions about anything search related or any comments or anything.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll go ahead and open it up. And again, the question and answer box is at the bottom there. So if you guys do have any questions for myself or Peter, definitely pop those in.
I can stop sharing for now.
Also, we'll have this recorded. So if you guys want to check this out later, if you missed any part of it, had to step out, Like I mentioned, we typically try to have these up in about 24 to 48 hours. Yeah, that was fantastic. Um, when you are kind of looking and talking with maybe a new client that was coming in, so let's kind of put ourselves in the position of maybe some of the people in our audience here that are independent SEOs, they're freelancing out there. Um, what sort of conversations should they be having with their potential clients in relation to internal search? Let's say that's brand new client, they're looking to get their brand new site up and going. They've considered internal search, but they don't really have anything. They don't really necessarily have a strategy in place. What kind of questions would they be able to ask their client?
Well, I think they could ask their client a few questions, and they could also have some suggestions. Like, I'm honestly not plugging Algolia; it's just the only one I'm familiar with. I'm sure all the other ones have it too, but businesses, internal search businesses like Algolia, they have small, really free or cost-effective options to quickly implement an internal search. But I think that if it was a really small, say, gardening business, I would, help them in part of their SEO approach and website build to think about how that could be a key feature of their site. And also how that, it could be pitched like, we can work on this kind of internal search experience together. And from there, we can work together on a landing page strategy. So that's kind of the way I would think about it. And it's just so often that there's a small business who has a finite amount of money to spend on SEO or whatever, and we go away and build kind of a select number of landing pages based on Google search data, which is a great idea, but it's also like, for those that come there, let's also learn from them what we don't have and what we should do next. So it's almost helping prioritize what you do.
Yeah, and I think that, again, kind of alluding back to what we had mentioned a little bit before, um, if you've put in the work to get those people to your site, those people are kind of like, those are the cream of the crop that you want to get the most info from. Google search data is fantastic for what it is, but it's a sample set of kind of what's going on. And so you're getting a general idea, but maybe not a full on pulse of the situation. So another question I had, because you'd mentioned that larger businesses or businesses that are having products that are like searchable, they're things that they can buy, e-commerce type situations, are really recommended for search. What about if your client is like, let's say, a plumber or a lawyer? What sort of options or what sort of conversations or suggestions could you have maybe for a potential client that maybe is in more of a service related business?
Yeah, I mean, I think lawyers are a good example. Like, I have a couple friends who I've kind of helped with some of their websites and things like that. And I think, I guess, to tie it back to internal search, I guess generally with Google SEO and kind of landing page strategy for, especially, I think, services companies, it's like there's an assumption that if you get 100 organic search visits to your kind of criminal defense page, that all those people that came there actually wanted criminal defense in the first place and definitely searched that. And maybe there's a bigger reason why there aren't as many conversions as is kind of the service business wanted, because again, maybe it was something slightly different that person needed that they couldn't find. And a lot of people don't want to call, or so I think for services businesses, especially, probably all businesses, like, I think internal search can help expose kind of those assumptions that, your landing pages are actually attracting the right traffic. Because I think you'd find out, especially on smaller websites, like if you're a lawyer with, 4 or 5 pages, again, it's kind of like that home loan that company that I mentioned in the beginning. Even if you learn from someone that there's a specific type of, defense that they're looking for example, you might attract 5 more clients, over the year. And that's a pretty huge thing. Um, So yeah, I guess it's just kind of learning again about how effective your offering is, or how good your landing pages are for what you offer.
And that almost even, it made me think that um, with those internal search queries that you can see on your site, that might clue you into maybe an emerging trend or an emerging thing that you may have not even thought to look of or look for in, Google Search Console. Like you may not have even like thought of, coronavirus tax work from home credit. Like as you're mentioning earlier, like if you weren't cued into that for whatever reason, like people might be on your site searching for that before you even were able to see that it was a trending topic elsewhere. So, I mean, that could actually even give you a head start to some capacity on what you would see trending maybe months later.
Totally. And it could, I mean, even I'm just thinking again about the lawyer example, because you mentioned the services. Like, even if you have a law firm and someone goes on there and you have a search box and you notice that, you know, they're always looking for a certain contact there, or little things like that, you can learn so much about. Like they might always say wanting to be talking to I don't know what you call it in a law firm, the owner, for example. Like it'd be good to always know if there's a contact that should be visible on the homepage all the time.
It's
That
true.
might lead to more conversions. You might need a new page about, or maybe you haven't added a page about the new lawyer, for example, or maybe they all need to have their own page. So there's different learnings that really I think internal search could help with for any business. And I get that it is a luxury to be able to focus on it, because content creation and and things like that are obviously a higher priority. But I think there are ways that people can focus on it, even with, like, I think some of the search providers offer a free version up to a solid number of kind of searches. So there would be, and it's also interesting, like for businesses to look at.
So can you maybe tell myself and maybe a couple of the other people that aren't necessarily as familiar with the software you're referring to? You said it's Angolia.
So
Angolia.
the one we use,
What
at
what
least,
does that do? Sorry.
so it's basically an API based search. Well, they have a crawler kind of search engine too, but basically what it does in simple terms is that they basically host your content in a search index, and you have control over kind of the ranking formula. So you control the algorithm. So if you want to put, say you run a law firm or whatever, and all your pages have, say, the name of the lawyer and the types of law they do, for example. You could go in and quickly pick out that metadata, because it has that, and just move that. You could even move like the types of law they do above their name in the algorithm. So basically all they do is they basically take your content, host it in an index, and then you get to decide how it ranks. And then the
Nice.
search box
Okay.
connects to that.
Cool.
And then they have built-in kind of analytics, or you can do things like Google Analytics with events and stuff if you're more technical, or more familiar with that kind of stuff. But I think, like, I know Algolia has at least up until a month ago, they had a free version that businesses could use. So I don't know. I think it's something that I'm not as familiar with WordPress and things like that as a lot of people on this webinar, but I'm sure WordPress has some sort of internal search plugin type stuff as well.
Gotcha. Awesome. Well, I think that's all I had as far as questions here. Looks like we didn't have any other questions popping in. So I think that's probably a good spot to wrap it up. Peter, thank you again so much for joining us. I know it was super early where you're at there, so I appreciate you hopping or waking up extra early. So thanks again. If you guys have any other questions, feel free to reach out to us through Twitter or through, you can reach us at Page One Power, or of course, you can reach out to Peter directly. Thank you guys again. We'll see you on the next one and have a good one.
Cool.
See you
Thanks,
guys.
everyone. Thanks for coming.